Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Let me remove this from this layer. Those of you who know, I have been kind of experimenting with different streaming software lately. So how do I get this dumb overlay off the bottom? Bear with me just a second here. And there it goes. All right. Let's bring up the comments. 5:15 p.m. here in the UK. 241 photography. Well, hey, good to see you. Looks like I have a few of you with me so far here. King Krut Gaming, good to see you as always, bud. Thanks for participating in these streams. So today we're talking about the Canon R5 Mark II. And so this is a camera that is rumored to be announced over the next several weeks, couple months. There have been a lot of rumors flying around about it being announced imminently. Now, the R5 is a camera that is arguably Canon's most successful camera in many years. It was a rough start with the whole overheating thing, but once they got rid of the overheating thing with the firmware upgrade, curiously at the same time that they released another camera with active cooling, it's been really good, and it's been so good, in fact, that when you take a look at the best-selling cameras and the best-performing cameras here in 2023, the R5 still very much holds its own against cameras that are much newer and at higher price points than it. Um, I have had an R5. I currently have an R5C. I also have several Sony cameras. And so putting in direct comparison, okay, the R5 to, let's say, the A7 Mark IV or the Alpha 1, or one that I do not have experience with yet, the A7 R5, the R5 still holds up in a lot of ways. This brings us to a problem, though, and the problem with Canon in general. And no, I'm not talking about the third-party lens thing. I know a lot of people are bent out of shape about that, and if you like, we can later in the chat get into that. But the problem that Canon has right now is not that they are lacking camera bodies. In fact, I think it's becoming pretty dense. Is there room for an R5 Mark II? Well, yeah, of course, it's an R5, but is there also room for let's see, you've got the EOS R, I think typically, I think, you can still buy the RP, I think you can still buy too. You've got the R7, the R10, the R8, the R6, the R6 Mark II, the R5, the R5C, the R3. I mean, do we need 10 Canon cameras to cover whatever we're covering? So at some point, they're going to need to start consolidating these cameras. And I am going somewhere with this. The strangest camera right now in Canon's lineup to me is the R3. The R3 doesn't make sense to me. It is, I believe it was going to be Canon's flagship. The Alpha 1 then came out. That is better in most ways than the R3. And I think Canon did in about faces. You know what? We're going to call this 3, not 1. we're gonna we're gonna wait until we have all this really impressive mind-bending stuff that we've been working on to develop into the R1 before we call it an R1. But the R3 is interesting because as a lower resolution camera, as a big professional body that it has, big battery, there's a lot to like about the R3, but the thing that's strange is the low resolution. And in 2023, is there room for a 24 megapixel camera as an alleged flagship? I think the R3 was designed specifically to get the sports shooters who are slinging 2 or 3 1DX Mark whatevers on them with big EF lenses, long glass, to get them into the mirrorless system and say, look, we have long glass now, the RF glass, and it's even better than the EF glass was. So I think that's what the R3 really was meant to do, but they need to up the resolution. Hey, Mike Ransom, thanks for joining. Okay, let's So anyway, I think that Canon's problem right now isn't too many camera bodies. Canon's problem right now is they keep coming out with camera bodies and not coming out with lenses. So if you take a look at their closest competitor, who is Sony, and I have Canon and Sony that I both use professionally. Um, Sony has native lenses for everything, and so the problem isn't that you're letting or not the third party lens makers in here. The problem is, where are the wide angle L lenses for Canon RF? Like where's the fast 24? Like I'm shooting on a fast 24 EF mount right now on the Canon C200. And so, but where's that lens in the RF system? Where's the fast 35 in the RF system? Where's a fast, Sony has a 14 G Master. Like, where's that lens? They don't have any of that. Where is the Canon R series tilt shift lenses? I still use a 24 EF tilt shift. So, instead of developing all these lenses, which would be really nice, we have the R7, the R10, the R. It's okay, I get it. You want to populate at every $200 increment in price point another camera for some reason. But I really don't see a big distinction amongst all these cameras. And this is something I make a living with cameras. So if you give me an R7, I could go out and make a living with an R7. You give me an R10, I can go out and make a living with an R10. I can go out and make a living with an R5. There isn't a huge amount of difference between all these cameras. Yes, I understand that some of them are crop sensor, some of them are full frame. They have different feature sets, but practically, we don't need that many cameras to cover that. And Canon is especially egregious at this, but we need wide angle glass. So that's the problem with Canon. Now, what do I want to see with an R5 Mark II? I'm somebody who I've had an R5. I currently have an R5C still. What is it that I want to see? I think there are a few things. Most important to me, and I know this is going to be different for other people, I don't care about resolution because I think the R5's 45 megapixels is a good sweet spot for right now, a snapshot in time, 2023. 45 megapixels is solid. You can deliver high-end work to high-end clientele at 45 megapixels, no matter what you're shooting. If you are shooting long, far away. So if you're shooting landscape, if you're shooting the, nature and birds and you're shooting sports, it gives you a lot of cropping room with 45 megapixels. It's a good resolution. And so I see that Mike Ransom, one of the comments here, is hope not 61 megapixels. I think that's. I'll get into that in the comments, but I don't think that's a real true spec. So what I think 45 megapixels is good. It doesn't have to be the same sensor. I hope it's not the same sensor because they need it to be backside illuminator or stacked. Would be nice. I think stacked is going to be the next thing. Stacked and or global shutter is going to be where this technology is going. And so the sensor needs to do that. I would like to see open gate video recording in the R5 Mark II. One thing that Canon needs to do is shore up their native control app. So the Camera Connect app from Canon is abysmal. I mean, it's a bad control app, and this is comparing not only directly against the Sony native app, the Imaging Edge app, but even like apps that you get with widgets and stuff. Like the app to control this mouse is better than the one that you get with a $4,000 camera, and so that really needs to they need to shore that up. I'm going to make a whole video about that, by the way, because I have before, and if you take a look at my videos before, you'll see a video where I compared many of the current Sony bodies and the Canon bodies. So I had an R5, an R5C, an Alpha 1, and an A7 IV that I went completely through everything with professional workflows about these cameras. And one of the things that I showed on that video was the native apps and how they function. So the R5 II needs to have better functionality with that app. I would also like to see with the R5 II symmetrical media. Now, that could be in the form of two CF Express type B cards. I actually really like and prefer the implementation that Sony has in their cameras with the CFX-A cards. Now, I understand that they're not as fast as the CFX-B cards, but it's really neat how they have a two-card slot. The CFX-A cards are significantly faster than SD cards. They are fast enough for any practical frame rate, except for maybe recording in RAW like some of the Canon bodies do. I like how you can have two of the same card, right? So you can have redundancy in any mode where the Canons do not do that, right? So the highest frame rates and codecs and everything that you can record in Canon right now on any of their bodies, I believe, you can only record to one card. You can do proxies on another card, but you can't redundantly record it to two card slots, and cards do fail. I now, in fairness, I haven't had a CFast card of any flavor, a CFast 2 or a CF Express A or a CF Express B fail, but I have had SD cards fail. Those of you who have not had SD cards fail, I'm telling you, it's just because you haven't shot enough on SD cards yet, but they do. I've had Sony Tough cards fail, and I've had Lexar cards fail, one of each. So redundant recording is very important to me in a camera body. You have the like I said, I like the Sony implementation of this better. The CFX-A cards, they are really fast in practice, and so I understand they aren't as fast as the CFX-B cards because they don't have as many lanes or whatnot, but practically speaking, these are really fast cards. And when you have the same kind of card, and so they're both redundantly recorded in two card slots on the same card, it simplifies life too. You don't need two different card readers. You don't need, to keep track of two different types of cards and such. So that's the thing that the Canon app needs to be better. I would like to see redundant recording if we are to have a new sensor, but I believe the 45 megapixel one is enough resolution. But if it's going to be a new sensor, I would love for it to be stacked or global shutter, one or the other. Um, One of the things that keeps me into the Alpha 1 as my daily real estate workflow camera versus the R5 or R3 or any Canon is the Alpha 1's ability to go up to 1/400th of a second on their maximum flash sync. So that's a big one for Canon. I think Canon needs to up that game too with their flash sync. So let's get into some of the comments here. Looks like you guys are chattering away. So I will go up to the top. King Truck Gaming. Let's make this live stream loud and clear. Let's do it, bud. And hang on, I'm going to make these comments just a little bit different here. Overlay, banners and comments style. Okay, we're going to go like that. Now we'll go back to the comments. And there, I like that better. 241 Photography, how you doing, bud? 5:15 p.m. here in the UK. Well, does that mean you just got off of work? Or does that mean you're just waking up? Because we're all different in this world, right? Nikon Z9 as well. Are you talking about how the R5 stacks up to the company? The R5 is still a really relevant camera. I mean, it's amazing how good this camera still is, like 3 years on. And Canon, this is a very successful camera for Canon. There was the whole fallout from the whole heat thing, and I think that's more of a marketing mistake than anything. They marketed it as an 8K camera, and but when it came out, it wasn't very usable as an 8K camera. So that's a marketing thing, and they've since have fixed it. But it's fantastic stills camera. Hope not 61 megapixels. So what Mike is talking about is the rumors that it is going to be a 61 megapixel sensor, which sounds spookily a lot like the A7R4 and now A7R5 sensor, right? I don't know why that would be the case. 61 megapixel is not like I think for 8K you need 42 or something like that. So 61 is a very odd number unless you're talking about the actual Sony sensor. And so that's why I don't think that rumor is true, because Canon is making their own sensors. They're one of the only companies that make their own sensors and don't buy sensors from Sony. I understand. If that's not true, then I'd be happy to be corrected by somebody, but I think that's the case. 5R 85 megapixels, I hope. I don't know, honestly, Mike, I don't know if I have room in my workflow and life for an 85 megapixel camera. I think and here's the other thing about that. If I wanted an 85 megapixel camera, I 100% would rather it be a medium format camera. So the pixel pitch is actually a lot bigger on that sensor. You can have clean noise performance, because even the A7R4, and I haven't gotten the A7R5 yet, but the A7R4 with its 61 megapixels, it is a noisy camera. So that is really like an ISO 100 camera. Once you get up over about 320, 400 ISO or so, you start seeing some pretty significant noise with the A7R4. Allegedly, the A7R5 with its new processing engine is a bit better, but really it's just a matter of physics. When you're putting that many pixels on a sensor of any given size to get closer together, the photosites cannot each of them gather as much light, and the signal to noise ratio drops because of that. So 85 megapixels, I don't personally have a need for 85 megapixels. I don't have a need for anything over about 40 or 50 megapixels. But again, I think the 45, 40 or 50 megapixels, the A1 is 50, the R5 is 45. That's a real sweet spot to me. But if I were going to go 85 megapixels, it 100% would be medium format. And I would love one of these companies to give us a medium format camera. I would mean we have to buy all new lenses, but C-Log 2, please, Canon. So the R5C, King Truck, um, you can interpret the RAW coming out of the R5C as C-Log 2 in your NLE. And it does make a difference. It does give you a bit more dynamic range than if you are processing it out as, or I'm sorry, you can define it as C-Log2, and it does make a big difference than if you were processing out as C-Log3. It does give you a bit more dynamic range, lets you play with it a little bit more. Is it a true representation of C-Log2 in that can the sensor, how much dynamic range can the R5C sensor resolve compared to, let's say, the DJO sensor of the C70, or the C300 Mark III. That's really the question. And Canon hasn't really been forthcoming about that. And interestingly, there's not a whole lot you can find online about it either. About if this is a true C-Log2 representation, is this just, it's obviously interpreting the raw footage, and raw footage is nothing but a data dump. But who knows? But the R5C, it does appear, even if it is the same sensor as in the R5, it appears the R5C's performance is a bit greater than the R5 in dynamic range, especially. I don't know why that is, but that seems to be the prevailing wisdom, and I think I agree with that. Having had an R5 and an R5C at the same time, I think that's true. Slav Guns, hey, good to see you. Thanks for joining, bud. Open gate recording would be nice. As a Sony person, I picked up an S5, S52 is C-Cam just for open gate. Oh, is that that's a Fuji, right? Um, yeah, just for open gate. Yeah, the open gate thing is interesting because, here's the way that I look at open gate. The cameras right now that can record an open gate are doing so, though, at a lower resolution than, let's say, the R5 and the R5C. Okay, and so for those of you who don't know, because I never know who's watching these things, open gate basically just means, instead of the codecs cropping to a certain aspect ratio, like a 16:9 or something like that on the sensor, it allows the entire sensor read to be used in the image. So let's say on most stills cameras nowadays, where you can shoot a 3:2 sensor size for stills, open gate basically means you can use the whole sensor and like any, so you can do that 3.2 sensor and just record the same thing. So the advantage to something like open gate is you can format your content in different ways just within the same recording. And so if you look at this image that I have right here, if I'm shooting open gate, I'm going to be able to make a vertical out of it and keep more resolution than cropping a horizontal image. That's the whole, point of open gate. Now, regarding that though, most of the cameras that I see that do open gate, that's great, but they're doing it at a lower resolution than, say, the R5C or the R5 at 8K. I personally would rather have the resolution. So even if it means I have to shoot 16:9 in 8K, I would rather do that than open gate in 4K because you still get the advantages of 8K. First off, it's a buttload more resolution. I mean, that's what people have to realize first off is to get a 4K recording, you only need about 10 megapixels. I forgot what it actually is. It's like 8.5 or like 10. It's right around there. Okay. To record 6K, you need about 20 megapixels. To record 8K, you need over 40 megapixels. And so it is a huge jump in resolution. It's kind of a logarithmic jump in resolution there as far as the amount of pixels you need to, because it's a multiplication, right? This by that gives you the megapixel count. So when you're talking about an 8K recording cropped in versus a 4K recording native, I would still rather have the 8K. You probably still are going to have more resolution to play with. And the bigger thing about this though is when you downscale it for a 4K delivery, you are also downscaling noise. And so that that luma noise that you see, that grain pattern, you are downscaling that when you go from an 8K to a 4K delivery, say. And a lot of times because of that, you don't need to run any external noise reduction or anything. So yeah, open gate's an interesting thing. Now, if we're talking about an 8K open gate, well, that's different. That'd be rad. I would want that. Totally with you on that one. Also recording straight to SSD. That would be, I'm kind of here and there that, I'd like to record internally whenever I can, just because it's one less point of failure. So I have, for instance, so my C200s, I'm recording on a C200 right now. It uses internally a CFast 2 card. And not only that, but the C200 came out in 2017, which means a lot of the high capacity CFast 2 cards, like I think you can get them up to like 2 terabytes now, may even be above that now. It doesn't play particularly nice with those. And so the way that people have hacked getting a C200 to record to um, higher media, higher capacity media is a dummy CFast 2 card with a cable coming out of it that you kind of shut in the door and clamp in the door there that then goes to a caddy that you can put SSD drives in. That's what I'm doing. Um, it's not ideal. I would rather have that same capacity drive as an internal card. Now, I think with the CF Express Type B cards, those do they go to 4 terabytes yet? They go to 2 terabytes. I think I mean, unless you're talking about doing like super long form and super high resolution stuff, that to me isn't a problem. But if you can get the SSD as a rigid mount on the thing, then I would agree with you. So if you take, let's say, the hot shoe, the smart hot shoe on the top, and make an attachment for it that is an SSD recorder, that's awesome. Then I agree with you. I would like to see it then. But until it's something like that that's rigidly mounted, I don't like having the point of failure there. Okay, Mike ran some DSLR in the past. There was a 5D and 5 DSR. Yeah, that's right. One all-around body and one high-resolution body. That's true, but the 5 DSR in the past was still, I think it was like 55 megapixels or something like that, and so that's becoming average these days. But yeah, no, totally. You know, and I mean, and the Sonys are like that too. You know, you've got the A7 IV, and then you have the A7R series. You know, the R4 and the R5 that are same body, different sensors. They are different bodies in that case, but SSD would be great. Yeah, I agree with you guys. I really don't like the points of failure, so I don't want it to be hanging off a cable. Especially, oh, I forgot to mention this. So the R5 Mark II, please give us a full size HDMI. You know, I hate these micro HDMIs that they're putting in, you know, multi-$1,000 cameras. It's like, what is wrong with you? So, I mean, Sony's doing it with their pretty inexpensive cameras in comparison. Okay, King Krut Gaming, sadly, it's in no company's interest to record straight to SSD. That's not even a thought to entertain. Um, Blackmagic does it, I think, you know, but they've always been a disruptor. Slav Guns, Panasonic does. I'm not super familiar with Panasonic cameras, so I'll have to take your word for it that they does. So does Hasselblad. Yeah, Hasselblad does one even better. They've got internal. They've got 1 terabyte of internal storage on that new camera they have, and that's awesome. You know, I would love to see more cameras do that. I mean, granted, it does mean if that drive ever bugs out on you, you probably have to send your camera in to get it repaired. Versus if you have one on a cable, you can just swap it out easily. But I think the Hasselblad's implementation of 1 terabyte on board is clutch. You know, that would be great to see with more cameras doing that. Worried about what I heard. Well, I hope you're not worried about what you heard over here, but hey, good to see you. Canon will never deliver the obvious features, just like no push on the lens front. The lenses are, you know, and that's one of the things that I said too, is their problems. I don't understand why they don't have, at this point, they've had mirrorless cameras. The EOS R, I think, was 2017, 2018. So that's 5 years now, and we don't have fast, wide primes. I don't get that. I really don't, because those are, it would seem, more practical, useful lenses than a lot of the giant super telephotos that cost like 10 grand a piece. Like, you know, I mean, how many of those do you sell versus like a 35? You know, you would think that would be here by now. I don't get that one, you know, but I agree with you. Okay, just got home. Good. Just got home from a day of oh, shot 5 houses. So you're one of us. I have two of them later. So it is currently 9:43 a.m. here in California. I've got a shoot at 11 and another shoot at 1. So that will tell you guys what the maximum time this broadcast can go is. 5 houses. Why do you shoot 5 houses in a day, man? I wouldn't be able to do that. You know, that sounds awful to me. 2 or 3 is like my max. At 3, I'm like, no, that's it. I'm calling it. Sony medium format would be good. You know, it's funny how there have been rumors about Sony medium format for as long as I can remember. You know, um, but the biggest thing with the medium format is you need a whole nother mount, especially in the case of Sony, where the E mount is just barely bigger than the sensor on a full frame sensor. There's zero possibility that Sony is going to be able to deliver a medium format camera and not have to have a different mount and different lenses, and that's a whole thing. But if Sony made a medium format, I'd buy one in a second. I really would. I think it'd be fantastic. R52 full size HDMI. I got you. C-Log 2. Again, I think you can interpret the raw footage as, but I think when you say C-Log 2 and when most people are referring to C-Log 2, they mean like an onboard 10-bit C-Log 2, like the C70, I think, does 10-bit C-Log 2. Unlimited recording. They do that. I think even like the R7 and R10 now are the recording limit is on one of them anyway is like 6 hours or something. I mean, that's unlimited to most people, I think. Fan, yeah. I mean, I think you know what you're describing right here is the R5C less the full size HDMI. R5C can interpret raw footage of C-Log 2, unlimited recording, and it has a fan. So, so it looks like R5C might be a good camera for you, King Crook. If that's your wish list, that actually already exists. RF lenses are superior to any E-glass. 28 to 70 f2. I have one of those. Don't need to change lens. It's a monster though. I don't know if you have one of those or if you've ever played with one. I have one. It's large. The 28 to 70 f2, but it's a fantastic lens. My only gripe with that lens is it breathes like a mother. So if you're shifting I mean the whole thing is it breathes heavy. The best Canon zoom RF that I have as far as breathing performance goes is the 24 to 105 f4 is really good. It doesn't breathe much at all. You can't really notice it when it's racking focus. Superior dollars and far less choice. I don't know what that is referring to. Superior dollars and far less choice. And let's see. I'm gonna go back to this though. Our RF lenses. Oh, that's what he's talking about. RF lenses are superior to any E-glass, and then Slav Guns is saying superior dollars and far less choice. I have a lot of both. I have quite a few RF-L lenses and quite a few G Master lenses. I It's hard to say. And the reason it's hard to say is because it's impossible to compare those two lenses outside of their native camera systems because you cannot adapt an RF to an E or vice versa. And so when you take a look and you test those lenses against each other, how much of what you're seeing is the actual lens and how much of it is the camera system that it's mounted to. That's what makes those difficult to compare. But I think in general, this goes and somewhat this goes but on a case by case basis with each lens, but in general, I think the RF glass is better in a couple ways. I think it is sharper, it's punchier and more contrasty. And the thing, as far as the features go of the RF lenses, the thing that I like about a lot of the RF lenses that is not present on the Sony E-mount lenses is that so many of them are stabilized. And this is probably a byproduct of Canon's sensor stabilization not being as good as Sony's sensor stabilization. And what's funny about that is when Sony's sensor stabilization first started to be prevalent, with the A7 III is the camera really that put Sony on the map, right? In the modern sense of what Sony is. It wasn't as good as the Panasonic sensor stabilization, which has for a long time been looked at as the gold standard, with the GH5 and everything. But it's still better than Canon's in that Canon has like the wide angle wobble thing, right? And they've tried with firmware updates to fix this and they can't fix it yet. It's still there. It's still annoyingly there after many years. And so I think one of the ways that Canon circumvents that problem because they can't figure out how to make their sensor stabilization work as good as some of these other manufacturers is they put a lot of the stabilization in the lenses, and that works really well on the RF lenses. Now, unfortunately, it does make them bigger, heavier, and more expensive than the Sony counterparts. So, Slav guns, you're absolutely spot on about all that. They're superior dollars and far less choice. That's true about the RF lenses. However, I think on balance, the RF lenses are a little bit better than the Sony E lenses. Where the Sony E lenses shine is, especially in the case of the G Masters, they are small, light lenses, right? It's going to be a much smaller lens for any given focal length and aperture, typically, than the Canon RF counterpart, and typically a little bit less expensive too. And I do, again, think a lot of that has to do with them not being stabilized on board. Okay. Heard people adapting Tamron lenses to Fuji medium format without issues. Yeah, you know, you can do, yeah, you can do things like that. Like I've seen like tilt shift lenses with focal reducers and things like that. You know, I mean, lenses that have a big image circle, you can still do that with. But you know, I mean, you're gonna need to have native lenses. If you know, I mean, Fuji has the GF lenses. You know, so you don't have to do that. 2870 f2 is nice. It's a beautiful lens. It really is. You know, I love that lens. Panasonic S52. That's what you were talking about. The S52. So you can do open. So that one does open gate. So okay. James Jackson Films. Good to see you, James. S52 is Panasonic. So that's what you guys were talking about. Open gate. James is saying hi to everyone. By the way, James. Hi. Full frame. Full frame open gate. Is that what you're talking about? Open gate 6K. Oh yeah, yeah. Open gate 6K at that. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Open gate 6K full frame. That's powerful. That really is. So because you can still, you know, um, you know, crop that around and stuff and do a 4K delivery. Well, first time you're live, been watching your channel for a while. Well, hey, I'm glad to have you here. Okay. Pro gaming, remember Sony G Masters are good for photography, but inferior for video. I don't know if I go so far and say that. That focus breathing is brutal, but they have focus breathing compensation in their latest bodies now. RF glasses, less breathing. I It depends on the lens. In the case of the 2870 f2, it doesn't have less breathing than anything I've seen. And the 50, the 50 1.2, that's no walk in the park either. That one breathes like a mother. The RF 50 1.2, and the Nikon S lenses have almost none. I don't have any experience with the Nikon lenses, so I wouldn't be able to say. But you know, I mean, all stills glass breathe. That's the thing. You know, I mean, it's not a when you're any of these lenses that we've talked about so far. We haven't talked about any cinema lenses. It is not a design consideration with stills glass typically, not high up on the list anyway, for the breathing performance to be sound. You know, and so that's why we have um, software workarounds in the cameras with like the focus breathing compensation. Yeah, there's only a few that can do 8K open gate. James Jackson says Confinity Mavo Edge 8K, the Sony Venice Zcam F8. Yeah, and so with the exception of the Zcam F8, I don't think anybody watching this stream has a Venice. If there was somebody, King Crut Gaming would be that person. This guy has like an obscene amount of cameras, and I still don't know what he does with them. 8K open gate, yeah. But I mean, but here's the thing though, James. Like I was saying, what what usefulness to you would 8K open gate be? I mean, are you delivering anything in that higher resolution? Is it noise performance that you're after? Is it just the ability to reframe? I mean, do you need 8K open gate? You know, that's where I would say, you know, that's where I would come back like, okay, you know, what is that good to you for? Slav guns, focus breathing compensation, and it works really well too. So my A7 IV, I have an A7 IV, and it works like I've played with it. You know, I haven't used it because I don't really shoot video on that camera, but I've played with it. It does work really well. That's exactly why their bodies need focus comp. It's stills glass though. You know, I'm telling you, stills glass. It's any stills body. The stills glass is just not designed with that as a forefront, as a leading design principle. So it's good for any of them. SSD externally are a big no for me, dog. Yeah, you know, I think James is probably on the same page as I am with this, you know, and it's the same thing that like my workaround with my C200s with the dummy C fast card with a cable that's like kind of clamped in the door, and the guy's like, you know, I'm always in the back of my mind, like, please keep working, you know, because it just doesn't recognize CFast 2 cards it recognizes I have an Angelbird 1 TB. It recognizes it, but only after you like reboot it. And so even that is like, is this thing going to jank out on me? The fastest CFast 2 card that my C200s will have no problem with natively, or I'm saying the highest capacity rather, they'll have no problem with natively is the 512 SanDisk Extreme cards that I've found. So RPK, good to see you, bud. I think Angelbird has a 5 TB CF. That's probably like a CFX B. I'm thinking 5 TB. See, now with 5 TB, but why do you need the SSD external record to SSD just because it's cheaper at that point? I'm sure the Angelbird 5 TB CFX card is quite spendy. So or NVM 4 TB, yeah, and that's probably a lot cheaper. Just getting a 2.5 inch drive 4 TB. King Krut Gaming, that's not true. There are camera companies that record the SSDs internally. I think you mean it internally, but it came out internationally. Kinfinity in particular uses two NVMe SSDs internally. Yeah, DJI uses SSDs for the Ronin 4D and drone. Well, the Ronin 4D is a whole nother conversation because that's a weird thing. It's one of those things that like the Ronin 4D is. It makes me excited for what the future of their regular gimbals may be able to do with that fourth axis. But the 4D as a camera, um, the focusing system is neat. It's a strange thing though. It really is. Okay. RPK, are you living on the income from real estate photography alone? Thinking of starting some of that to get some more cash in? The answer to your question is technically no, because my wife also works. But if my wife did not work, then yes, I could live on the income from real estate photography alone. James Jackson Films. This is King Krut Gaming. Unfortunately, there isn't too much incentive to choose those companies offering compared to the cost. Yeah, and I agree with the King Krut Gaming. I mean, that's when you're looking at a company like Kinfinity and Zcam and all that, it's like it is. There's okay. So if I'm out shooting real estate with a Sony camera and I drop the thing, right? Let's say I break a lens, I can walk into a Best Buy and buy a lens, or I can walk into a Best Buy and buy a camera that is going to work with all of my support gear and get me through the day. When you have so an understanding that Confinity and they use similar lens mounts and stuff, but um, there is something to be said for just the prevalence of the common systems, and what that gives you. So that really, that makes a difference. It really does. So my grandson, Sony motors on lenses seem to be great, quiet and focus great. That's true. The newer ones anyway. The 85G Master, the 50 1.4 Sony Zeiss. I have both those lenses. They're noisy as all get out. So, but the newer ones, I agree. The newer ones are great. RPK, the stabilization of the 1535 2.8 is amazing. It is impossible to film handheld with the R5C, but that lens helped a lot. Yeah, I haven't tried to film handheld with the. Have I? Yes, I have. I filmed handheld with the R5C. I've had to stabilize it in post. I was filming when I did that on mostly the 51.2, which I don't think is stabilized. But yeah, the lens stabilization for like RPK saying, the lens stabilization on the Canon lenses they're great. Camera with an open M.2 slot that can be swapped would also be great. Totally. And anything that's rigid, I think I would like. I just don't like the cables and the dongles and stuff, and especially the Canon implementation of giving us the tiniest, most fragile connector for anything that we're hanging on the thing. James Jackson Films, 8K Open Gate, opens the door to a Kipton adapter. Isn't that like a Superman thing? For using medium format lenses in their full glory, can do 4:3 format. It gives you really close to shooting IMAX with. That's interesting. James, you have way too much time to nerd out on all this stuff. Like, I don't know what a Kipton adapter is, man. I thought that's what Superman is afraid of. Let's see. Other benefits for OpenGate 8K is 3840 vertical resolution, downscaling for reels. Yeah, right. Clients love the extra resolution look. Yes, you can flip the camera, but that adds more time on set. Yeah, downscaling, downscaling has a lot of advantages with high resolution captures. I personally think, and I've thought this for a few years, that the sweet spot right now is 6K. Um, I thought that when I was shooting video on the Pocket 6K. I thought that when I was shooting video on the Red Komodo. Uh, the Canon R5C that I have shoots 8K. Just that difference between 6K and 8K in just the ergonomics of using it is problematic. 8K uses way more data. It's way more taxing on your system. You have, way more data to have to store. It takes way longer to render. So I think the sweet spot is 4K, or I mean 6K, because in 6K you can descale the noise, you can crop and reframe, but it's not so taxing with the workflow like 8K is. And that'll, in my opinion, on that'll change, and that'll change as time goes on, and computers get faster, and drive capacity gets even cheaper and such. But yeah, but 8K OpenGate, if you have the time to deal with it, and the resources to deal with it, then that's great. Totally agree. They need to increase their support in USA. Yeah, we're talking about the Kinfinities and stuff. I know Kinfinity has opened up a support location in Burbank, but they need to take direction with Red in that department. Well, Red's an American company. Uh, let's see. Okay, Loud&Clear R5C sounds like a good choice, but I want to wait for the R. Let's see what the R52 has to offer. I for me, really, it's the biggest thing for me in my workflow is the app, and this is the same app that Canon employs over all of their modern mirrorless cameras. So any of them that you bought in the past several years all have this same Connect app, and it just is not very good. Unfortunately, I also know that that's not high on the priority um, for camera design. So I don't know. I'm holding off to buying any other Canon camera until I see what the R52 is all about. I'm with you there. Um, it's getting so crowded in Canon land, though, that it's going to be more difficult for Canon, I think, to differentiate between an R52, an R3, or R32, and R1. We're going to start seeing some triple hammer moves. That's for sure. Okay, King Crack Gaming. Oh, I've made it through the comments. I also enjoy that Canon gives you 12-bit codecs. Yeah, so only has 10-bit, not too much latitude. That's true. If you take a look at the video shot in a 12-bit RAW on even like the camera that I'm shooting right now, the C200, which is, what is it, like 6 years old now, and you can pick one up at B&H. Like, I picked up two of them up at B&H for $2,500 a piece. The 12-bit raw, 12-bit 4K raw coming out of the C200 is gorgeous. I mean, it really is. It is better looking than anything coming out of Sony. That is absolute honest truth. So anyway, we've been at it for just about an hour, and I have all of the comments answered. So you have my list of wishes for the R52. I'm going to sign off here, and your list of wishes pretty much equal mine, with the exception of how important that app is to me. And I would like to see a higher flash sync speed too on the R52. And I think that they might actually do, because the R5 is their higher resolution body, and flash sync matters can matter a lot to portraiture photographers too. So that's a big market for them. So thank you everybody. Thank you for joining in. King Croc. Hey, yeah, thanks for a live. I hope it went better this time. Using this. So what I'm doing is this is the EVMux software. I am doing my best to throttle the codec going to EVMux, hoping that it's going to be a little bit more stable. Now, the trade-off there is it's not going to be as high of resolution with as much detail. So I imagine that this feed probably looks not the greatest. It's kind of fuzzy, but at least hopefully it's not jumping around and skipping around and stuff. So it's like I'd said before, it's my internet availability in my area. The upspeed is abysmal. There's nothing I can do about it. I already pay for the highest internet that I can get, which is like gig down speed or whatever, but it's like 40 megabit per second upspeed, and it's not hugely stable either. So I do what I can with what I've got. But it's nice seeing you all, and I'll see you soon. Peace.